Hi, everyone on Facebook. It says we're live on Facebook. So I'm excited to see all of you, and I'm very excited to talk to my friend Tamara Kissane, who I know from Artist Soapbox, but she got all famous on me, and now she's the Piedmont Laureate.
Yes, yes, it's my 1 year of local fame.
Yeah. So how's it going with the Piedmont Laureate agenda and event calendar? Because now we're in the middle of a pandemic, so the typical things that you would normally do as Piedmont Laureate and hosting live events and classes and workshops, everything is kind of on pause. So how are you, and I guess Wake County, reimagining how this year's Piedmont Laureate is going to go?
Yes, well, I will say that the various art councils that support the Piedmont Laureate program have been very supportive and flexible in the way that I'm approaching this year. The timing was challenging because I had set up many different types of events that were supposed to happen. I was getting ready to reveal them. I was going to be starting at the end of March, and they were going to happen through April and into the beginning of May. And once this pandemic really started gaining speed, I had to cancel all of them, which for people who set up events, you know that setting up the events take quite a bit of time. Unsetting up the events also take quite a bit of time, and contacting people and canceling things. And so it was time consuming on either end, and also really disappointing because there were people that I was hoping to spend some time with, and I wanted to bring their work, more into the public. So I had a lot of sadness around the fact that I had to cancel those events. Inevitably, some of these will be moving online, although I haven't scheduled them yet. But I think we're going to be hunkering down for a while. So if I want to move forward with some of these, we'll be using online platforms to do that. In the meantime, what I'm doing is basically conducting a lot of podcast interviews for Artist Soapbox. So I've been releasing about 5 a week, and I have 6 interviews scheduled this week. So I'm basically trying to really connect with local playwrights and local voices, and then release those interviews through the podcast platform, because a lot of our playwrights have writing tips for people who are at home and they want to talk about their own process. So I can still get content out. It feels a little bit different than what I had imagined. The Piedmont Laureate program asks that I conduct 20 events over the course of the year. I still have a lot to do, but in the meantime, I have this project, the podcast project, which I'm really enjoying a lot.
And anybody who's not familiar with the Artist Soapbox, I would so encourage them to put that on your podcast playlist, because it's such a good podcast, and you are just such a ray of positivity. You helped me when I started my podcast, and it was so wonderful. So I'm so appreciative. I hope everybody will follow you and subscribe, or whatever they do on podcasts. I'm subscribed, so every time you put out one, I get one, and I've been overwhelmed with the amount of content you've been able to put out on the podcast, because it's time consuming. But
Yeah.
when we spoke last, it was probably a day or two after the theaters had shut down, after kind of the whole city was beginning to be in this lockdown mode, and people were starting to take this situation very seriously. Um, what I loved when I spoke to you is you compared what was happening in the arts community to a grieving process. And you were the first person at the time that I had spoken to that actually compared the loss of what we're all feeling to grief. It's now been 2 or 3 weeks since we had that conversation. And as with any loss, grief has its emotional ebbs and flows. It's not just a constant sadness, it waffles between anger and depression and everything in between. So, what are you hearing from the artists you're talking to and the playwrights you're speaking with on how the emotions are morphing as this pandemic goes on and on? I think now we're in week 3. So, what's the temperature of our arts community that you're hearing?
I think that it is still a little of what you just mentioned, that there is kind of an ebb and a flow, and grief is a very large container that contains so many different emotions and different shades of those emotions. And so I can, I personally can experience lots of different types of frustration over the course of one day that are all sorts of different colors and vibrations, and they manifest in different ways when I let them loose. So I'm still hearing from a lot of people that they're a little bit all over the map and up and down on any given day. And I think something that I realized very quickly and continue to realize every day is that everyone is having a different type of experience during this pandemic. And so much depends on your mental and physical health, if you are home alone, if you have other people in the home, what your employment status is, and, what your financial status is, that people's experiences are singular. And I think we need to tread very lightly when we try to generalize what this moment is and whether we need to be making recommendations for what other people are doing. So, I mean, I can only speak to my experience and to the people that I've been interviewing on the podcast. The people I've been interviewing on the podcast are really focusing on making work in the way that they can. So there's a lot of conversation about releasing expectations around the type of work that they're used to making, that they want to make, and really focusing in on what they can do to feed their creative spirits now, even if it doesn't look exactly like it did before. And I know that's been my experience. I haven't been able to write very much these last 3 weeks because I have 2 little kids at home and I'm constantly being interrupted. It's hard to get my brain in that. Oh, my alarm just went off. Okay. It's hard to get my brain in that space that I need to create the world. So I'm shifting my work because I can't do what I want to do. So I have to do something else.
Now, it does seem, though, like you've dipped your hands in a lot of projects other than the Artist Soapbox. So I want to talk about some of those. There's a WTF Women's Theater Festival bake-off competition, which you're involved in. And then, of course, you're continuing to put out the content on Artist Soapbox, and you're working on a new audio drama, collaborating with other playwrights, which is very exciting. In your case, and what I'm hearing from folks is this is a period where creativity is either being nurtured because we have extra time on our hands, or creativity is being hindered because people are still in kind of a state of shock.
Mm-hmm.
And collaboration is now being redefined for our theater community, because we're all used to collaborating in person and face to face, and now we can't do that. We're touchy feely theater,
Right.
and now we're social distancing, which is just not in our vocabulary. So, for you personally, are you finding this is, and even for the artists you're talking to, is this a period of nurture or hindrance for creativity, or just reimagining creativity?
I think I would say reimagining, because we need to do this in a different way. So there's a learning curve, of course. Everybody's trying to get up to speed on the technology and figuring out how we can leverage the technology to make it something like a theater experience. It's not a theater experience. It's not the same. But what are the essential ingredients that we can retain? And part of that is this face-to-face stuff, and it is having conversations, and it is collaborative creating. And those are the things that I'm hearing consistently from people that they're yearning for. coming together to make something, coming together and hearing familiar voices or friendly voices, I think has been a priority for everybody. Um, I've been breaking things down into bite-size experiences. So things that I can get done in 5 minutes or 15 minutes. And a lot of editing is happening right now for people, I think, because it's a difficult time to generate new material. There's so much processing that's going on that people are trying to make sense of things. Some people use writing as a refuge in those cases because it's a place to kind of pour those emotions, not in a finished way, but almost as a therapeutic tool to just generate the content. It goes on the paper. You don't have to carry it around anymore. But for people who are looking for a more finished product, this is a really great time for people to edit, to go back to projects that have kind of been languishing on the shelf or in the Google Drive or wherever, and to go back and revisit them, given that, maybe it's been a couple of years and we've gotten wiser or at least older, and now we have a new perspective on the thing. So that's what I'm hearing from people.
And what I'm finding, at least for myself, and I love how I mean, it's such an individual experience for everybody. And, I know we go on these videos every day and we put on a happy face and we're trying to be positive for the community. And I, like everybody else, am having these ebbs and flows of emotion. It's kind of a roller coaster, but I'm trying to find the gratitude in the small moments, whether it is cooking with my son. My son is 21 years old. I don't think we've ever cooked in the kitchen before, even when he was a little boy. And one night we made meatballs together. And it's like the gratitude of that small moment, because he's not even supposed to be home right now. He's supposed to be away at school. That's what's carrying me through to the next day. And having these conversations, connecting with people I care about, like you and like all the artists. I mean, it's kind of funny. I was telling somebody last night, these videos are about me connecting with my friends and just doing it in a public way. So I think it's important to savor the little moments, which I don't think we do when we're so busy doing other things. So at
Right.
least I don't. I can speak for myself. So that's kind of what is getting me through, I think. Trying to find a balance, that's a whole other conversation. You and I were talking about that before we went on, balancing motherhood, being a wife, cooking dinner, um, keeping things at home on an even keel, and then balancing creativity in your professional life is a whole different ball game.
Yeah, absolutely. I came downstairs the other day and told my husband I had just been on a podcast interview, and I said to him, these conversations are giving me life right now, because part of it is that they're kind of reminding me who I am, because I'm used to being with people in a certain way. And right now I'm in a house with my kids and my husband, and they're wonderful and I love them. But my role in the house doesn't have a lot of nuance, shall we say.
Yes.
And there is a lot of laundry and a lot of stuff to clean up and a lot of stuff to cook, because we're just here all day together, And so, and I want to really emphasize that we're in a privileged position, and I acknowledge that. And that does bring up all sorts of gratitude throughout the course of the day, as you mentioned, that I recognize over and over again. And it's been a wake-up call for us in that way. I was talking to a friend of mine today, I think it was, and I said, I think maybe we were just doing too much before. Like, maybe we were just really busier than we needed to be. And as a person who likes to be productive, it's hard for me to admit that,
Mhm.
but I feel that it is about 100% true.
I agree. We always talk about over-programming our kids, but when you're a doer and productivity and what you put out in the world is important to you as an artist, or in my case, as a journalist, it's hard to slow down. And yet in the stillness and in the quiet, great ideas can happen. So it's just embracing a new normal, I think, for everybody right now and figuring out how to cope.
Right, right. So people who know me know that I have a black thumb. Like I can't grow anything. I always kill everything. And I recently decided all of a sudden that I needed to have a garden on my back deck, which is hilarious because I don't have much of a back deck. But I planted some seeds and the seeds are coming up, and I go out and I visit the seeds like 4 times a day. And I look at the plants and I talk to them. And I mean, it is ridiculous. I don't even know who I am in those moments, but it gives me so much joy to see those little green shoots and to think like maybe I might get a radish out of there in a week or so. I don't even like radishes, but I can't wait to have that radish. And it's just, I was moving so fast before that never would have even been a possibility. I mean, we were just like microwave central.
Yep.
Here, you know what I mean? It's like if it can come out of a box and we can rip it open and eat it, that's what we're going to do. Everybody was going 900 miles per hour. And of course I miss that. But I also don't miss that. I like talking to my pea plants and my radish leaves, and it feels very grounding to me. I really need that.
It reminds me of when we were kids. Remember, we used to plant the little gardens in the milk cartons. You used to
Yes.
on the top of the milk carton, and you would plant the garden in the milk carton, and it would sit on the window at school, and you'd watch it grow. And every morning, you'd run out there to see if it was growing. That's the joy you're describing. So
Yes. I know. I wish that I had known how much joy this would give me. Like, I should have been doing this for like 20 years. I mean, every morning is Christmas. I run out there and I'm like, oh, look at this, this bounty.
So let's talk about audio drama.
Yeah.
You were writing audio dramas before it was trendy, before it was before the pandemic.
Mm.
Starting with the premiere of your audio drama, Master Builder, which premiered last summer, right?
Yeah.
At the Women's Theater Festival. So, as theater makers are trying to reimagine the way they deliver stories and tell stories, do you think audio dramas are going to become more and more popular? Because I feel like every day when I log on and read podcasting news, I'm seeing more and more audio dramas popping up.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your feel on that?
Well, I feel like before this pandemic, podcasting was already on a huge rise and had been building for a while. And then the scripted audio fiction was coming right as a part of that wave. So things were already building, but I think now even more so. And, I was thinking about that today. Part of it for me is just screen fatigue, because we all spend so much time on Zoom all day and looking at our computers. It's nice to be able to do something else other than look at a screen. So I really like to listen when I go on a walk, or listen when I fold my laundry, or listen when I look at my radish plants, because it means I'm not looking at a screen, and I can activate that part of my brain, that sort of visual, imaginative part of my brain, in a different way. And so I don't know I think that more people will create audio dramas because it's something that they can do inside. But I think more people will listen to audio dramas because it's something that's not on a screen. So I'll be really curious to see how that all develops.
And you and I have talked about this before, because I find this really interesting. When I go to see a show as an arts journalist, the things I'm looking at and evaluating are not just the script. And typically, they're not original scripts. Typically, it's a script from Lauren Gunderson or some well-known playwright or a book writer who's written a well-known musical. So unfortunately, not a lot of the work that you're seeing here locally is original, but so you're kind of looking at the script, but that's secondary to performances, sets, lights, costumes, all these design elements that help tell the story. When you strip away the visual design elements and you're just hearing the story unfold and hearing the language, what kind of challenge does that pose to a playwright? Because to me, that's super exciting. To me, the language becomes the star of the show and is not. I think playwrights so often are overshadowed by design elements because you forget, well, the lights are in your face, costumes in your face. So the playwright, if they've done their job really well, it kind of gets lost in all of those visuals. And an
Mm-hmm.
I can't. The playwright is center stage. So that's exciting to me, but as a playwright, especially with Master Builder, because that was a full production and then you translated it to the audio drama. So what did you find and learn in the process when you strip away all the visual design elements?
Yes. So this is a question that we could talk about for like 7 days, and I would be happy to talk about it because it's so exciting to me. The first thing that I learned was that a play is not an audio drama. So they're two different beasts. I did adapt a stage play into an audio drama, but if I were to write straight to audio, which I am also doing, I would construct the script in a different way. And I'll give you an example of that. So when we go to the theater and we sit down in the seats and the lights go down, we know that we are going to be in our seats for a certain amount of time. And as a playwright, you know that. People are going to come in, they're going to sit down, they're probably going to be there in their seats for at least 45 minutes if you have an intermission. So they can't leave, or they probably won't leave unless they're super offended, right? So you have more time to kind of let things sort of reveal themselves slowly and at a different pace. The way that you build the tension feels really different because you have a captive audience. If you're writing for scripted audio fiction, you have between 30 seconds and 3 minutes to get people completely invested in your audio piece, or they will turn it off. So they don't have to be there listening to you. So that the way that you approach time when you're writing for scripted audio fiction is really different than the way that you approach it when you write for stage. And in Master Builder and in the next audio drama that I'm releasing, The New Colossus, the way those plays are structured, because I based them on Ibsen and Chekhov's plays. So my play has very similar structure to that. The way that they're structured is the first chunk of the play is this sort of slow reveal and introduction to the characters. And I always get very anxious because I wonder if people are going to listen past the first episode to when things get really good if you were, paying attention. So the first thing that I learned is that they're very different beasts, and you need to take those things into consideration. And then the other piece is just thinking about how language and sound can add clarity to the piece and can kind of partner in communicating the action in a completely different way. And so it gives you like a little bit of a microscopic lens. Like you have to really sort of drill down into what is essential to reveal to the audience and when. And not having that visual element means in some ways that you can kind of hold back and reveal your hand at the pace that you want, because it really shutters in, I call it the sound point of view. So you're controlling the sound point of view for the audience. When you are an audience member and you're sitting and you're seeing a stage play, you can see the whole stage. So you look where you want to look. But when you're making a film or you're making an audio drama, you are controlling what the audience is experiencing. So that point of view becomes really important in how you kind of string them along and reveal these little breadcrumbs as you go. Did that answer your question? I feel like I went off on a tangent.
No, I love that. And what I think is really exciting about audio drama is people are challenged to use their imaginations.
Mm.
When you see a play, the director has made a lot of decisions in interpreting that play for you. if you're listening to an audio drama, although the playwright or the producer has made certain decisions when it comes to sound, the rest of it is up to you. You have to imagine what these characters look like, or so talk about the and that makes the audience more of an active audience, an active listening audience, than if you're just going to a play and it's a passive experience. You're just sitting there and watching and whatever's thrown at you, unless you're in some sort of interactive devised kind of play. But for most plays, most straight plays, you're just sitting there watching it and you're passive. So talk to me about active listening and an active audience, because I think that from an audience perspective is very exciting.
It is exciting. It's really interesting because I think for audio drama, first of all, it's often an audience of one. And
Mm-hmm.
so you're having one person, you're speaking to one person at a time, essentially. And, when you're watching a stage play and you have a group of people, they sort of build upon each other's responses. So there's group laughter and group, gasping and stuff like that. So it's speaking to a different size of audience. But the other thing is that often people listen to audio dramas, but they're not just listening to the audio drama. They're driving in their car, they're folding their laundry, they're doing whatever, they're going on a jog, whatever they're doing. And so their attention is sometimes split. I don't think we can depend on people paying attention in quite the same way that they would if they were in a theater seat. So I think clarity is kind of everything. You have to make sure that people, when you're writing scripted audio drama, you have to make sure that the listener knows who's in the room and what the name is and when they're exiting and what the environment is. And, all these sorts of things to kind of keep reinforcing the context in case their mind is wandering as they're driving to pick up their groceries or whatever. So it's a really different way of presenting things. And the other piece of that is, again, that sound design is so important. And I want to shout out Edith Snow, who did the sound design for Master Builder, and Sam Elliott, who's doing the sound design for the new Colossus, which should be coming out in the next couple of weeks, and how much work it takes to do that and to layer things in. Because I think the more that we rely on sound, the more decisions have to be made about exactly what the footsteps sound like, and exactly, how loud should the waves be, and like all those sorts of things become really important.
I'm gonna for the folks watching us on Facebook, if you have anything you want to add to the conversation or you have a question for Tamara, type them into the comments section and then I can read them to Tamara and we can respond as we're speaking about this. One thing that's very interesting to me is when the theater shut down, there was a lot of conversation about live streaming plays. Like, well, why can't you just film the show that you were going to do and live stream it? Mm. So I guess when you're talking about audio drama from the perspective of one thing, one of the artistic producers told me from one of the local theaters is when it comes to licensing a regular show, if you were putting on a production and you are going to want to film that production, in order to get the live stream rights or video rights, there had to be a clause of it can't be streamed over and over again. Even right. What we're seeing like on Broadway HD, Oklahoma's made free, but it was only made free for 2 or 3 days, and then it's not free anymore. So there's all these questions when it's coming to licensing. If you're putting out an audio drama in a podcast format, it is there typically forever. There is no, I'm releasing it for 3 days, you listen to it, and then it's done, because it just takes too long. I mean, for folks who are doing podcasting, it takes a long time to set up your podcast in directories. So you can't choose which podcasts get to be there for 3 days and which podcasts get to be there forever. iTunes will cut you off really fast if you start playing with that. So when it comes to licensing, where do you see people writing audio drama being able to license or sell their work, because all of a sudden the model is so different? Or does that matter right now as we're developing the new medium?
That's such a good question. And I don't know the answer to that because I've only ever produced my own stuff.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it seems there are these big companies that are commissioning writers just like you would for TV shows and, you know, films and whatnot. So I imagine that the contracts that they have are very similar to those types of mediums because, you know, you've got reruns and you've got, you know, Netflix and you've got all sorts of things. So that must be built into the contract. But that's a really good question. I don't know the answer.
And I would love to see a way for people writing audio dramas and putting out content to make money. I mean, if you wrote a play and somebody produced it, conceivably, you would be making some sort of licensing fee on that production. And so it seems to me that audio drama should be the same way, but I don't know what that model looks like. And it'll be very exciting to watch the business side of audio drama develop, because I think that's kind of the next step as this evolving art form evolves, or as this art form evolves.
Right. Well, you know, it's interesting because I think that for playwrights, there can be multiple productions of their play across the country because they go up and then they go down. And so for audio drama, as you mentioned, if the piece is produced and then it never goes away, can other people produce the same script in a different style? I don't know. It's an interesting question.
And you know, this is all evolving, all of this new virtual reimagining the way we deliver art
Mm-hmm.
is changing. And so a lot of what we're seeing in this pandemic, I think, is going to speak to long-term changes in art, in the art industry, I
Mm-hmm.
think. Because we're going to have to address all these issues from a financial and legal and copyright standpoint, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, this is something that I think you're really familiar with because podcasts are free,
Mhm.
quote, free to consume. It's very hard to monetize them. And that is something that all of us who are making podcasts are trying to be really creative with, but it's difficult.
Yes, I'm hoping people will join me. Triangle Artworks has asked me to do, I shared with you the class that I did for the American Theater Critics Association last fall, and I reconfigured that class to be more user friendly for artists across all mediums. And so I'm doing that podcasting workshop for Triangle Artworks on Thursday, and I'm hoping people will join me because I think there's a lot of myths about podcasting, and the fact that podcasters make money, I think, is one of no one's making money podcast. Very few people.
Don't do it for the money. It's not going to work out for you.
Yeah, it's not get rich quick, and it takes a really long time. So I think if Tamara and I actually uh, measured how long it takes to produce any given episode as to how much we're making an hour, it would be very pitiful.
Right.
Our hourly wage would be terrible.
Yeah, I don't have the stomach to do that exercise, Lauren.
Yeah, no, me neither. So where does your love of language and storytelling come from? Have you always been a storyteller from the time you were a kid?
I have always been a storyteller from the time I was a kid. Absolutely. I might have told you this story. I hope it's interesting to someone other than me, but I have a younger sister and we used to play together and all of our games had to do with me like imaginative play. And I would play all the parts except she would get to play the chorus. And And we even have evidence of this. We have like recorded audio tapes where I would be like working really hard, telling my stories, do my thing. And then she would sort of chime in with her chorus lines, except I would also be part of the chorus. So she didn't ever actually get to have her own parts either. So it's, as long as I can remember, I wanted to tell stories. I wanted to write stories. I wanted to do this with other people. So when I got older and I was in college, I started writing with friends. Cheryl Chambly and I wrote together for like 12 years. It's just, it was just a fun thing, I guess, for me, always a preferred activity.
Hmm. I love that. And I think one thing that's very exciting about the Women's Theater Festival project you're working on, I keep wanting to call it Shake and Bake a Play or something like that, but it's not Shake and Bake a Play. It's the baking
Bake Off.
the Bake Off, and it's where you're encouraging people to bake a play, create a play, although they've missed the boat for this round because it was due at 7 o'clock tonight, about an hour or a half ago or so. But kids, you guys were encouraging kids to write as well. And I know Burning Coal is doing their Kids Write program. So talk about, I mean, there are so many parents at home right now scrambling to become master homeschoolers overnight. I kind of think this is a crazy joke because a friend of mine used to say to me, your kids are out of the box kids. You should homeschool. And I was like, never in a million years will I homeschool. And here we all are trying to figure out how to homeschool. So I'm like, this is the curse you've put on me. My daughter is in her last semester of the senior year and I'm being forced to figure out the homeschooling thing. As people are trying to create the homeschooling model for themselves, how can they incorporate playwriting and storytelling into what they're doing at home?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I'm sure there are educators who could answer this better than I can. But I guess one thing I'll say is that I've seen a couple of articles saying that this is not homeschooling, this is crisis homeschooling. And so we don't have to be like professional homeschoolers who are doing it right. We just need to kind of try to keep them alive and keep them learning and do the best that we can do given the circumstances, which are pretty stressful. So that's one piece. The nice thing when I've worked with kids is that they tend to hold their ideas pretty loosely and they don't suffer a lot over coming up with them. There's this sort of understanding that little kids have that there are so many ideas out there and they don't sort of rank and stack them in the way that adults do. Like, here's my idea, but it's a stupid idea. I mean, that eventually comes as kids get older, unfortunately, and turn into small grown-ups. But for a long time, all ideas seem valid and possible. And so if you give them, like the Triangle Bake Off, if you give them a set of 5 ingredients, they'll just go with it. Like they'll just whip off 2 pages. My daughter did this exercise and she just sat down and did it and was like, look, I made this thing. And what do you think? And she thought it was great. And she wasn't like sweating bullets about like, what will other people think? Or I don't want to use these ingredients, or I can't think of anything, because it was more of a game than something that she tied her sense of self up in, if you know what I mean. So I think anytime that we can encourage kids to think of creative work as something that is fun and game-like rather than a way to measure their worth as a human being, I think that's what we have to do with the arts.
Well, and I love that. And there are so many outlets right now. I interviewed Laura Haywood recently, who goes under the handle on social media Broadway Girl NYC, and she is on the board of directors for an organization called Story Pirates, and they take works of children, plays and poems and all sorts of works, and turn them into plays that are produced in
Mm-hmm.
New York and Los Angeles. And I love that. I'd love to see that kind of model here. And maybe the Bake Off that WTF is doing is a springboard to something like that, because it's really exciting to me. I love it. I actually, I never wanted to be on stage, but I always enjoyed writing. And when I was a kid, I did write a play and enter it in a competition. And I thought it was the best thing ever. And it was really based on an experience I had had with this. I had a, when I was a Girl Scout, we visited a nursing home, and I became very attached to one of the people living in this nursing home. And she and I developed a relationship. Her name was Molly. And I thought it was so beautiful, this relationship, that I wrote a play about it. And so it can be, I mean, plays that kids create can be as simple as something like that. Um, so I love it when children write. I think people need to write more, no matter what it is. Theater criticism, plays, stories, fiction, nonfiction. We need to all be learning how to write.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, if you have a moment to tell your child a story, or if your child can't write, have them tell you a story and write it down, because they come up with things that are so hilarious and off the wall and sometimes really deep and poignant. And it's fun to capture those things. I remember when my daughter was really little, she was having some big temper tantrum, and I was trying to wrestle her into, I think it was like duck footy pajamas. And I was wrestling her into duck footy pajamas, and she was screaming her brains out. And I said, once upon a time, there was a little girl and she didn't want to go to bed. And her whole body just relaxed in that moment. And she was looked at me with these really big eyes because she knew I was going to tell her a story, and the story was going to be about her. And I it was one of those moments that I'll never forget for the rest of my life, because it became apparent to me how important story can be to our experience as humans. And she was little. I mean, she was maybe like 18 months. She was not a big, an older child. She's a storyteller too. So it didn't work so much on my second child. I whipped out that trick. Didn't, none of the tricks work on the second kid, but the first kid, it really did.
Now, the second child, you have to reimagine everything all over again. You think you have it figured out, and then you have a second child. Or I have friends who have 3 children, a third child, and it's just a whole new ball game. I know you've spent quite a bit of time interviewing folks who are creating audio dramas for HowlRound, which is a really exciting project for me. And if folks watching have not been on HowlRound, it is a wonderful platform. Highly recommend that you go check them out. There's a lot of great content there. But can you talk to me about some of the audio drama creators that you've spoken to who are putting out some interesting pieces that maybe we should all be aware of as we're looking for stuff to do while we're gardening or driving or hanging out in our house wanting to turn off the TV?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes, I interviewed for 6 people for HowlRound, and I think the final episode of those 6 is going to go out early next week. The 6th one, unfortunately, I was talking with a playwright who is going to have his New York stage production of a piece he had originally had read as an audio drama. And that, of course, has been postponed until next year. And so we had to kind of reconfigure the introduction a little bit for that. So as a preview, I interviewed for the 6th episode of HowlRound, Ivan Idebury, who hosts the Parsnip Ship. And the Parsnip Ship is really interesting because they are live play readings. Now they're reconfigured to be for audio, but it has much more of a feel of a play reading. And then that concludes with an interview with the playwright. And so that's always really interesting to hear, what the playwright was thinking. And Ivan she curates her seasons thematically. It's just a wonderful treasure of plays if people are looking for potential stage plays as well. I spoke with 2 of the script writers for a scripted audio fiction piece called Unwell, and they have a team of 4 writers, and I spoke to 2 of them, both of whom are parents. And so we started out talking about just how the writer's room is structured and how they approach. They're both from the theater in Chicago. And so what that transition was like, it was so great. We totally geeked out on this. And then we kind of concluded that conversation with talking about like how writing for audio is actually easier than trying to be a playwright and show up in the theater. And so it was a really nice way for me to connect with another set of parents. But I am happy to put together a list of my favorite scripted audio fiction pieces. There are so many. And these are not people I've had conversations with, but just my favorites. Like Wooden Overcoats is amazing. The Amelia Project is amazing. Starship Iris is great. Um, there's so many wonderful pieces.
If there's some that you think of, will you send them to me and I can put the links when I put this out on RDU on Stage?
Mm-hmm.
All of these videos go out on RDU on Stage and then they stay archived on the Facebook page as well. And that way people can refer to it as a resource for things to listen to. People are always asking me, what's your favorite podcast? What should I be listening to? So this gives people a taste of what audio drama is. Where are you in the production of New Colossus? Where are you in the production of your new work?
Oh,
Wise.
I'm,
And people
I'm,
still can listen to Master Builder.
yeah.
That's still out there.
Mm-hmm. I'm super excited. So we recorded in November and have, okay. So let me back up just a little bit and I'll get to your question as quickly as I can. I wrote the piece in 2015. It was a stage production in 2016. And now we fast forward to 2020 and it will be released as an audio drama in the next week or two, maybe. So we recorded, as I mentioned, in November at Trailblazer Studios in Raleigh, and then went into post-production and have since kind of kicked things into high gear these last couple of weeks to try and get this out as quickly as possible. So yeah, I mean, I've just listened to the last cut of this like yesterday, and it's going to be 6 episodes that we release all at once instead of staggering them like week to week. We're just going to dump them all in and people can listen the way they want to. Each episode will be about 20 minutes. And hopefully people will like it. I'm super excited. It has original music written by 2 of our cast members. I'm super, super excited about it.
And what did you learn from converting Master Builder from stage play to audio drama that you were able to bring to the New Colossus audio production experience?
I think that I was just encouraged to take things to try even more things, and part of that is the music. So the New Colossus had the stage play had music on stage. We had people performing, and I wanted to retain that and use it even more, which is riskier. The Master Builder does not have that, and so I just wanted to dive deeper into the soundscape and really try and leverage as much of an audio experience as I could and just take some chances. So there are a couple, for example, we have a character who's doing a podcast episode in the New Colossus, and we have kind of like a dream sequence in the New Colossus. And so I try to just like, if I'm going to do this, I might as well just like push it as far as I can and try and take some risks. And I also learned that people like short episodes, as I mentioned. They like short episodes. They like bite-sized pieces. So for Master Builder, I think I did them in acts as though they were stage plays. The first act, I can't remember, was like an hour, and the second act was like an hour. And that's just too much for people because they don't sit down and listen all the way through. So yeah, I feel like I learned a lot about how to direct people, how to direct the actors. I think I formed my own opinions about sound design and how to use sound and those sorts of things. So I don't know, people will be able to tell when they listen.
Any creative tips or exercises you can challenge our viewers to try as we're navigating this pandemic, as we're navigating this weird time of quarantine,
Mm.
whether it's journal writing or meditation or dictation? I don't know.
Mhm.
What's working for you?
Well, I used to work at the Duke University Hospital for a couple of years as the literary arts therapist. And I used to walk around to patient rooms and hand out journals and poems and talk to them about writing exercises and things like that. And when you're in a hospital situation, you're not necessarily trying to make great art. You're trying to organize your thoughts or um, kind of off gas your emotions or process what you're going through. People use those journals in a lot of different ways, but they did use them. And so I think that if there's resistance to writing, but it would help you, then setting a timer for 5 minutes is where I would start. And it doesn't have to be great. It just has to be on the page, but give yourself 5 minutes to put your thoughts down on paper. And I know some people would do that and then they would rip it up and put it through the shredder. And so it's not something, it's using writing in a different way than creating work, but it's using it more as, as a therapeutic tool. And if you are a person like I am, where before I sit down to write, sometimes I need to sort of write down to the thing that I'm trying to say. So I'll spend 5 or 10 minutes, just whatever's in my mind, kind of putting it down on the paper. And then finally at that point, I'll get to the meat of the thing. I'll get to the juicy bits or what I'm really wrestling with or what I really want to explore. So giving yourself that time to write down to where you want to be, I think is a gift that you can give to yourself as a creative person.
I love that. I also find for myself, the prettier the journals, the more I want to use them. Sometimes the prettier they are, sometimes I don't want to use them at all. But the prettier the journals, I feel like it sparks creativity. And I have a good friend who is a fiction writer. And she'll be so happy if I share these with you. But for every special occasion, whether it's Mother's Day or Christmas or my birthday, she gives me a journal and she finds the prettiest journals. So I'm going to share. Um, she knows I'm obsessed with The Wizard of Oz, and she knows I'm obsessed with Peter Pan. And so I don't know who makes these journals, but I'm going to show them to people because this is like the most beautiful journal I've ever seen. So it's this is the Peter Pan journal she gave me. I'm going to try to show it to people. And inside, the lines of the journal are actually the text of the Peter Pan book.
Oh,
And I love this journal so much. I keep telling her I'm not actually going to use it because it's so pretty, but she's given me two of these. The two stories I loved as a child were Peter Pan and Wizard of Oz. So I have a Wizard of Oz one too. And these are just the prettiest, most beautiful journals. So I think for me, the prettier the journal, the more likely I am to write, or the more personal it is. Like these are very personal because these are stories that I love. The more likely I am to use it. So find
yeah.
journals that you love. I will look to see who produces these journals. I don't even know where they come from, but there's a bunch of titles available. So if you're a writer or you like stories, especially classic stories, there's a lot of classic ones available, but I love my journal. So
Yeah, I mean, I think it's whatever works for you because I like yellow legal pads and
yeah.
I like spiral bound notebooks because I know that I'm going to tear through them so quickly that I don't want to like spend, $15 on a journal that I'm going to have for like a couple of days, after I've written through it. And also because I'm afraid that my work isn't going to be good enough to put in a fancy journal. So I just want to like throw a bunch of crap on a legal pad and like Feel okay about that.
But that's okay. I guess if you're trying to do it from a meditative place or a diary type of perspective, the prettier the journal. If you're trying to do it from like I'm going to write something pithy or brilliant or something that maybe I'll use later, or from a playwriting perspective or something like that, then yeah, the yellow legal journals, you can't, that's what I write all my reviews on, the yellow legal.
Yeah.
But we are approaching our kind of the 1 hour mark. And so I'm going to let you go. I know this is kind of your precious private time when your little ones are in bed and you can just be Tamara and create and meditate and take time for yourself. So I want you to have that time this evening. But thank you for joining me and having this conversation. I love these chats with you always. I can't wait to see you in person. The virtual thing is weird, but take care, stay safe, keep creating, keep engaging us.
Thank you, Lauren. You are just such a gift to our community, and the way that you support the theater artists here, it's amazing. And I know how much work you put in. So thank you so much for that. It means a lot to all of us. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And it's a labor of love. I'll keep doing it as long as I can maintain the stamina to do it.
Yeah.
um, but thank you. And thank you everybody for watching. Tomorrow night at 7:30, just to put my shameless plug in for folks, Charlie Brady is going to be interviewing Lauren Kennedy Brady, his wife. Lauren is the producing artistic director of Theater Raleigh, and I'm so excited. There is no social distance. They live together, so they will be in the same place, and they will be. Charlie will be interviewing Lauren, and I'm really excited to see. He knows her really well. He knows all the stories, so I can't wait to see what they share. And we'll see you back here tomorrow night at 7:30. Thank you, Tamara, and thank you everybody for watching.